I was in one of those Facebook groups and I noticed there was a real habit of usually young women coming into the group and saying things like, my Dom told me he really wants to slap me in the face during sex. I don't like that, but because he's my Dom, he says I have to do it. Is that normal? And the amount of times a question like that was asked in that group started to really frustrate me because I kept giving the same answer over and over again. In polyamory groups, there's an automatic go here, read this, shorthand. In kink, there just hasn't been. There is no go here, read this, watch this. That'll tell you everything, that you can just shorthand a new person. And so I was like, there should be one.
Welcome to the Relationship Diversity Podcast, where we celebrate, question, and explore all aspects of relationship structure diversity, from soloamory to monogamy to polyamory and everything in between, because every relationship is as unique as you are. We'll bust through societal programming to break open and dissect everything we thought we knew about relationships, to ask the challenging but transformational questions: who am I, and what do I really want in my relationships? I'm your guide, Carrie Jaroslaw, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive, and coach. Join me as we reimagine all that our most intimate relationships can become. Today's episode is part of our conversation series. I'm just one voice in this relationship diversity movement, and it's important to bring more unique perspectives into the conversation. Today, I'm talking with Emily Blake, creator and writer of an animated series called Welcome to Kinkyville. In this episode, we talk about her cautious exploration into kink BDSM and how it helped her heal her past. We also talk about her desire for people to release sexual shame and embrace sexual desire, and how diversity and fluidity within this can enhance relationship fulfillment. But first, a little about her. Emily Blake is a writer, producer, nerd who cosplays, LARPs, and plays D&D and waxes poetic about removing shame from consensual sexual desire. She lives in Los Angeles with her cool husband and 2 goofy dogs. Let's get into the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Relationship Diversity Podcast. I'm super excited about my guest today. I have Emily Blake with me, who is a writer and producer, and who has written, produced, and starred in an animated series about kink and BDSM. And I've seen it. It is so whimsical and it's so approachable. So it, I think, really helps open people up to, if you're curious about kink, but you don't know where to start and you don't know how to learn. And then I think some kink education is really far out there for a beginner. So this was so approachable. I'm really excited about this project and we'll get more into it. But first, Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for that great introduction.
Yes, thank you for being here. And what I resonated with you when we talked before recording was the connection between relationship diversity and how you talk about kink, because you talk about coming together with your partner or partners to design what works for you in terms of what kink could look like. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about kink out there. People can go really far in their mind to what they think it is, especially if they don't have any education in it. And I think there's so much color within the kink world to design what works for you. And so that was the connection between relationship diversity and what you're doing. So before we get into your amazing project, could you introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are and how you got into this world and this exploration of BDSM and kink?
Sure. I used to be a school teacher, high school teacher, but I've always been a writer. That's what I went to school for. And I wanted to be a screenwriter. I came out to Los Angeles and I was teaching, and lots of adventures happened. Some not adventures happened. And I was married to someone who was not great for me. And you're very sort of stereotypical marriage, nothing fancy. We just did what most couples do. But I was really unhappy. And I eventually got divorced. And I remember thinking I was really lazy in the bedroom. I just wanted to lie there and not really work. Partly it's because I wasn't happy in my marriage, but also because I was talking about this to a friend who was like, "Oh, it's okay to be submissive." And I was like, "Wait, what? What's that?" And that caused me to start Googling. And then I just got deeply involved in the world and did lots and lots of research. But because I was divorced and untrusting, it was a lot easier for me to potential partners. And so through that, I slowly learned what I do and don't like. I feel like I mostly was pretty safe because I was so cautious and so untrusting. So that's how I sort of got into it. That's the beginning of my kink journey, was just doing a lot of research. And I didn't have a ton of partners. It was more like I got pretty lucky in that right away, after some vetting, I found a partner who ended up being my dom for 4 years.
So there's a lot of misconceptions about kink, and I've done other episodes about it. But as a cautious person, as you described yourself, going into this world, how did you go into it? What were some of the steps that you took in the very beginning?
I mean, obviously, I went on FetLife.
So tell
FetLife is
people
like,
what FetLife is, because there might be people who don't know what that
okay.
is.
It's a whole lot of things. It's like a message board, and it's like an old school message board where you have different groups you can belong to. It's all online, but you can message, you can find partners that way. You can post porn there, but you can also just like ask questions and learn about things. It's not entirely always safe, is sort of my issue. Is there's a lot of predators on FetLife, but you can find some weird shit on FetLife and be like, kinks you have no idea existed. So FetLife is like the first place I really went. I also found a couple of Facebook groups. Facebook was a little more liberal back then with what they were allowing. Some of the groups I belong to are no longer in existence because Facebook clamped down on sexual content. I read some books. The book game is not great, in my opinion, because a lot of the books I read were very overtly sexual and not talking about kink as a, like, they felt like they were coming on real hard with kinks that don't interest me, and they were being very salacious. And that's also an issue with FetLife sometimes, is I didn't feel like, as a person who was just cautiously exploring, like there was anything for me that didn't involve just trying to push my boundaries just through reading. And like I remember this one book I got that I thought was very promising, but immediately in the first chapter, the author started talking about standing on a bar at a kink space and peeing on the counter. And I was like, whoa, okay,
It's too
that's
much for
not for
me.
me. It's too much. So but I learned over time to pick and choose what was for me and what wasn't for me. Do a lot of reading and a lot of educating myself. And there are a couple of really good polyamory groups, honestly, that have a lot of really good relationship advice. And that I used that, although I wasn't polyamorous yet. The problem was there was no one source that was really good for new kinksters.
Hmm. So that's where you started to think, how can I fill that space? Because I agree, for people who are interested, it's very easy to be turned off by some of the content out there.
Mhm.
Exactly what you're saying of, oh my God, this is too much. And before we go into your project, I'm curious what you found as some deeper personal healing possibilities as you were exploring kink. What was kink for you other than maybe pushing your boundaries a little bit?
My mom is a narcissist, and I grew up in a household where I was the golden child. I don't know if anybody out there is familiar with the rules of narcissistic parents. There's usually a golden child and a black sheep, sometimes a middle child. I was the golden child, and my sister was the black sheep, and I was expected to fix things all the time. I was expected to be the one who was bringing people together. Whenever my mom and my sister disagreed, I was responsible for bringing my sister back into the fold. I was responsible for making sure everybody was okay. And so it taught me that my needs are less, that I have to do what I'm told, that in order to be a good child, I must be the one who benefits everyone else around me. And in return, I was the one who was the best child, the favorite, but as long as I towed the line. And what that ended up doing to me is that when I got married, my needs became secondary, and I married someone who needed to be fixed. And I had this weird complex thinking I can fix anyone. I'm the fixer. And it made it really hard for me to make decisions. I remember standing in a store with two shirts and just being like absolutely unable to decide which shirt to buy. And what was great about being in a really positive, submissive relationship is that it actually helped me in that regard, because if I'm standing in a store with two t-shirts, and I have done this, I have texted my dom and said, Which one am I buying? And he'll tell me, problem solved. I don't have to stand here and feel this anxiety. And over time, that actually made me more confident making decisions. And by the time our relationship ended, it ended largely because we had gone in two different directions. And one of the reasons we'd gone in two different directions is I had gained a lot more confidence and I no
Wow.
longer needed someone to tell me which shirt to buy. So for me, that was my experience with kink was a lot of that, a lot of teaching me to relax, teaching me to trust myself. So it was really beneficial in that regard.
That's amazing. And I
Yeah.
hear from so many who go into kink and BDSM that there's a lot of dynamics within them that they find healing from in whatever they experience in BDSM. And there is, like we said before, just a whole range of how that can show up. And so thank you for sharing that because I know that that was personal, but I think it's important for people to hear. I think a lot of misconceptions about BDSM kink is it's just, I just want to go and have like raucous sex. And it could be that. I'm not saying that it's
Yeah.
not that. And I am saying that there are a lot of other reasons that this really serves people and helps people heal parts that maybe like therapy or traditional ways just cannot reach. So I appreciate you telling us your story. One of the things that you talk about being really passionate about is releasing sexual shame and how you have found, and through your animated series and through your experience, that BDSM and kink helps to heal and release sexual shame. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah. Before Elon Musk took over Twitter, I had a really active Twitter account with quite a few followers. And every now and then, especially once I really got going on my kink journey and started working on this project, I would say, hey, does anyone have any really burning questions about kink? My DMs are open. As long as you're polite, ask me whatever you want. And surprising the first time, not the second or third or fourth time I did it, I got a ton. Like every time I asked this question, I'd get five, six people. The vast majority were men asking, "Hey, if I want to spank a woman or I want to tie a woman up, is that wrong? Am I a bad person?" And they only asked this because I said, these are private. You can DM me. I will answer your question. And they were never gross. I honestly never got anybody being salacious in my DMs when I asked this question. It was always honest questions. And it was so many men who were afraid that they are bad people because they have these desires. Women get it too in a different end, but honestly, in that respect, it was so many men. And I think they've just been carrying this around, this feeling of guilt, this feeling of shame, this feeling that I'm not a good person because I want to do this. For women, it formulates a lot in I'm a bad feminist. I know I went through that. I'm a bad feminist if I want some man to tie me up and tell me what to do. And so we don't talk about it. Our parents don't talk about it. Society doesn't like to talk about it. You see people will jokingly post about anal. Ooh, like it's some, and it's like sometimes I'll come in there and be like, oh yeah, let's talk about anal. And then they're like, oh, wait, but yeah, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Let's talk about it. Because the more you talk about it as if it's not this shameful thing, the more people will be comfortable admitting what they want because they don't tell their partners. They don't tell their partners what they want because they're so afraid of being thought of as being real weird.
Right, right. So, what is the antidote to that? And what one of the things you said was normalizing the desire, normalizing the discussion. What else? How do we start talking about it differently?
I think you also have to advocate for yourself that you have to be willing to tell your partner what you're into. And you have to have a partner who is not going to make fun of you for it. Have a partner who's going to be like, okay, that's not something I'm into, or that is something I'm into. Let's explore it. In the end, I think that's, but also education. I think more unintimidating portrayals of kink that normal, everyday people, Donna Reed is probably kinky. Everybody has something, even if it's a little thing. Even if somebody wants to try anal one time and they're like, experiment. And that's great. That's great. Try it. Maybe you don't want to do crazy stuff. Maybe you're completely vanilla and all you want to do is missionary for the rest of your life. As long as your partner's cool with that, sure, good for you. But I think we need to build a society that is okay with that. Our founders were prudes. Our founders came here and were immediately like, no fun for you. And that is
Right.
what we've built our nation on. So that's,
This is about work. It's not about
yeah,
pleasure.
yeah. And we have to combat that every day. Making sex work something that we accept is okay and not assuming every sex worker is some sad person who just has no choice. There's a lot of nuance, but really in the end, it's just about being able to have a conversation and not immediately go, oh, I can't talk about this. Let people talk about it. Only if it doesn't make you uncomfortable. Don't force your kink on people, but
And I think it's finding those safe spaces to have the conversation and also allowing yourself to feel the feelings of the shame and kind of move through that, be in a space where
mm,
one person can move through the feelings that come up because there's so much programming
yeah.
about being nasty, dirty, wrong, whatever it is. And those feelings are really bound to come up when you start investigating. I'd love to hear your perspectives on the range of what BDSM kink could look like, starting with the most cautious, the most like, I just want to tip my toe in, and then give us some ideas of what it could look like.
Well, one of the things that I did in the pilot episode was that I recommend fuzzy handcuffs because fuzzy handcuffs are great. They're comfortable. They're easy to work with because a lot of times they just operate on standard belt system and you can hook them to your bed frame if you have one, but they're also really easy to slip out of. So if you're scared, it's like, I can get out of these cuffs. So I recommend fuzzy handcuffs as a place to start. Maybe just using your hand to spank a butt a little bit, stuff like that. Just testing I think one of the problems is people get so excited when they discover they're kinky and they tend to go a little nuts. And we get what's called sub frenzy, where you're like, I need to do this. I need to do this right now. I need to find a dot. And then you get a little desperate. And then that's what leads to abuse. But I think dial it back, start small, start slow, test the waters. You don't have to find all of your kinks right now. And even if you like something now, you might change your mind, decide you don't like it later. That's all okay. I think that's really the key is just start with smacking your butt, doing a little light cuffs, or I don't recommend regular handcuffs because they hurt. I don't, that's me. And it's okay. Even if you're really kinky, it's okay to not like crazy stuff. But that's it. I've done things with my husband that I was like, he wanted to try. And I was like, all right, we'll try it. And then we try it. And I go, I did not like that. And then we don't do it again, but we try it.
I really love what you say about trying something and then feeling okay to say, that isn't my thing. Because I think that there's this idea of escalation, that escalation is just normal, meaning that I tried this. And then that means that we're going to do that a lot and we're going to escalate it to something even more, to more, to more, to more, to more. And it sounds like it's really important to be checking in with yourself all the time. And then really having from the foundation a conversation and open communication with your partner to say, let's just try this once. And then let's come back together and see how it was. So for people who, let's say for couples who try something and one partner is really into it and the other partner is like, nope, not my thing. How would you advise people to navigate that kind of thing?
If one partner doesn't do it, you don't do it. If they don't want to do it, that's sorry, it's off the table. You have to either, if you're polyamorous, you can find a partner who will do it for you. Or if you're open, you can find a sex worker or a play partner. If you're monogamous, watch some porn. Honestly, I think if you're listening to this podcast and if you're someone who's interested in kink, you're probably not going to be opposed to porn. I know some people are. To me, that feels a little, unless it's like an addictive thing, I feel like it's a little silly to think porn is cheating. Anyway, I know people have that conversation all the time, but enjoy your masturbatory fantasies. Find a way to meet that need on your own. But if one partner doesn't want to do it, don't make them do it. Sorry. Sometimes
Yeah.
your partner doesn't want to do things that you want them to do. My former dom and I used to do shibari a lot. My husband does not know shibari and isn't really super interested in learning. He's like, but I feel bad. I want to tie you up. I'm like, that's okay. That's okay. We'll get out the fuzzy cuffs. And there's still other things we can do that I enjoy. You don't have to tie me up. It's fine. And if I really, really, really want to be tied up, I can go to a shibari class and be a subject. It's an option.
It sounds like there are options. I think a lot of times we get into extremes. You don't like
Yeah.
this. I do. I got to figure this out. This isn't working for me. But there's a lot of gray area to find a way to satisfy whatever it is within you, whether it is watching porn or fantasy, but to really honor each other. Because I think what I've heard from other people and experts that I've had on with BDSM kink, that trust is super, super important in that practice, especially if you're doing it a partner and you're exploring edges that could possibly be scary, that trust is really, really important.
Yeah, I feel like I know some people are in long-term marriages before they figure this out. I know there's a whole lot of officially straight men who enjoy cross-dressing or maybe they dabble a little in homosexuality, but they'll secretly go onto Grindr as cross dressers, try to find someone to cheat on their wives with because they don't feel like they feel so much shame. We've talked about this, removing
Mhm.
shame. They feel so much shame about the idea that they like to wear women's clothing that they cheat on their wives. And they're carrying the shame of their desires, but they're also carrying the shame of being a cheater. And their partner is in the dark. And I know marriage is complicated. I'm not going to tell anybody how to do their marriage, but I feel so sad for that because it feels like I want a world where you feel like you can tell your partner you like cross dressing or that you're bisexual or whatever. And your partner's just going to go, okay, let's figure out how to here's some panty. Where are my panties? I don't know. Who cares? Well, some people care. I don't care.
Yeah.
But it's complicated, but I want a world where you feel like you can tell your partner that and your partner's not suddenly threatened. It's better if you feel like you can tell your partner the truth than cheating on them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. There's so much in that you just said. And I dream of a world without shame at all. But there's another level underneath that. It's like the woundedness that then created the whatever it is that's done that then causes the shame. So there's a complexity to it, it's multi layered. And at the same time, I love to think of a world without shame where we
Yeah.
can be our authentic selves and be accepted. I think that's really what we all want is a place to be accepted and seen for who we really are. And I think that there is that possibility in people exploring kink and BDSM, not for everyone, but for people who are interested, for people who might be listening to this somewhere in the world who have a curiosity, but don't really know much about it. In comes your show, Welcome to Kinkyville, which I have seen and I love it. It's so approachable. So let's go into that. I'd love to hear more about how you came up with this idea and the process that you went through because you've been working on this for I think you said 4 years.
Six
It's
six years.
6 years, 6 years. So there's probably quite a story behind it. We'd love to hear it.
It was a combination of I used to be a teacher and I love to research and I can not know something about a subject and give me like 2 weeks. I love the internet for that. And I read a lot of books. But I was in one of those Facebook groups and I noticed there was a real habit of not always young women, but usually young women coming into the group and saying things like, my Dom told me he really wants to slap me in the face during sex. I don't like that, but because he's my Dom, he says I have to do it. Is that normal? And the amount of times a question like that was asked in that group started to really frustrate me
Mhm.
because I kept giving the same answer over and over again. In polyamory groups, when someone comes in to ask the same questions you've seen over and over again, you recommend the ethical slut. You tell them to go to Unicorns R Us. There are sites, there are books, there is an automatic go here, read this shorthand. In kink, there just hasn't been. There are some really amazing podcasts out there that are about kink. If you love queer kink, I highly recommend What's the Safe Word? There's Sex with Emily, which touches on that. There's just a ton of really good ones, but there is no primer. There is no go here, read this, watch this. That'll tell you everything that you can just shorthand a new person. And so I was like, there should be one. I also had written a screenplay at the same time that I had decided the frame of the couple that was in the script. I since abandoned that script, but the frame of the couple of the story was going to be a couple that had a show that was doing this. So I was like, what if I just make that show? And I was initially just going to have two people in some kind of basement studio just doing YouTube videos. And I met with a friend of mine who's a producer, and she was just like, no, 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 no. This is bigger than that. You should write a whole narrative show and you should star in it. And I was like, no, I'm not an actor. I'm a writer. I'll produce. I'm not an actor. And she's like, nope, this is too personal to you. You have to star in it. So it was going to be a live action show. And I went to one of my groups that, again, no longer exists on Facebook, which was this real sex positive group. And I've said, okay, I need someone who, at the time, I thought I was straight. I'm not. I was like, I need someone who is polyamorous or bisexual, a person of color, because I'm white, someone who is a switch or a top, because I'm pretty firmly in the bottom category. Basically, someone who is a sex expert, a kink expert, and can be my expert person to do this with. And I found Javeda Bay. She has a series called In Bed with a Millennial. She is all of those things. She's also just an amazing person and has been an excellent collaborator. So I got with her. And then the pandemic hit, and my dumbass said, oh, there's no way to do live action right now. Let's turn it into an animated series, which is the stupidest thing I've ever said in my entire life because animated series take way longer to make. And I didn't really know anything about animation at the time. I do now. And so years of work, the pandemic came and went, and I was still working on this project. But I'm really glad we decided to make it animated because it gives us room to do a lot more magical realism. We can show butts and it doesn't feel intimidating. It allows for a much more friendly show. So yeah, it's an animated series about kink education, and we have a pilot, or you could treat it as a short film. That's basically an introduction to kink. Gabriel is the aforementioned Dom I was with for 4 years, and when I told him about this project, he voluntarily came on board and fronted the money to shoot a video for our crowdfund. He directed it. He's done a ton of. I feel like I'd be remiss not to mention his contribution because I couldn't have made this without him. We are no longer together. We actually broke up 2 weeks before the crowdfund launched, so it was a fun time. But he was hugely instrumental, and also we had just a lot of Kickstarter backers who've been very patient because this has taken a long time, and they were really supportive and great, and I appreciate every one of them. And Dan Savage, who interviewed me on Savage Lovecast, and that honestly is the reason this got funded. I don't think we would have gotten funded had it not been for Dan Savage. So I just wanted to mention all of that, but specifically Gabriel because he put a lot of work and his own money into this. Even if we never sell the series, which we're really hoping to do, but even if we never sell the series, that episode is still viable as something you can link to when you meet a new person who wants to get into kink.
Yeah, and we are going to link it in the show notes. And please, everyone, when we're done with this, go watch it. It's, I think, 8 minutes. It's short, but it's so educational and it's also really fun to watch. So it takes the heaviness out of what this could be for someone who's a little bit nervous about exploring. It brings a lightness to it and is fun. And I think that's a part of any sexual exploration is bringing fun to it. It's pleasure. Sex is pleasure. And any kind of expression in the body, I think if we all targeted more towards pleasure, this would be a better world. And sometimes pain is pleasure in the kink world. And so we'll link that down. So go over and check that out. And I think it's on YouTube.
That's where it's on YouTube. There's also, you can also go to welcome.to kinkyville.com. Yeah.
Yeah. So go on YouTube, like it, comment. Let's show the people who are in charge of making things serious that this is something that people want. People want this education. And again, it's so approachable. I'm very curious where you would go from the pilot and the different episodes that you would have and the different things that you would explore, because I'm similar to you in that I'm curious but cautious. And sometimes I see some heavy duty BDSM kink and I'm like, that's not the place for me. That's not going to work for me. So I appreciate the newbiness that you have with it.
The objective when I was writing it was thinking about couples that have seen 50 Shades of Grey and they're like, oh, I don't know. Do you want to? Maybe you want to get a little spicy, and they're like very cautious and they've been like very normie their whole life and they're like, I don't know, spice it up. So those were the people I had in mind when I was writing at least this first episode.
That really came through because that's the beginning of the episode is
they're watching a 50 Shades of Grey knockoff. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're meeting this couple that's only ever had basic sexual experiences together, and to see the journey that they go through in 8 minutes. And I think the animated aspect, I come from production and the arts, the animated aspect makes it even more fun.
Thank you. I'm so glad it turned out the way it did.
So where do you think your future in this area will lead you? Where are you hoping?
Hopefully, right now, the film industry is in a coma. No one is buying new content, much less new content from somebody who's an unknown. I have some things that are in the works that might help that. But the hope is in the new year, when things start to pick up a little bit, to start selling it or to start pitching it. We have an excellent pitch deck, which is basically a book that is like a slideshow or a PowerPoint presentation, more or less, about your project. I'm ready to pitch. We have some connections. We're going to try to take it. Honestly, Netflix is probably the most likely place for this to go because they've had shows like Bonding and How to Build a Sex Room and Big Mouth and a lot of real sex positive content on there. So I think this is something that could very easily fall in at Netflix, but also Amazon Prime. But to be honest, if there's some little network somewhere that wants this, let's talk. Because as long as they can afford to make it, and I can do anywhere depending on who wants it. 10-minute episodes, I think, is really good. We can do a half hour if necessary. I modeled it pretty heavily off of Adam Ruins Everything as far as structure. And one of the things that Adam Conover has talked about with Adam Ruins Everything is what used to be a web show And when they went to TV, they wanted to do half-hour episodes. So they had to do 3 different stories per episode, per topic. And he talks about how impossibly hard that is. So I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I see that because I think that each of these topics does warrant 10-ish minutes. And I think trying to make it into 3 things per episode, then also I could see why it was so challenging for the writing team to constantly do that. So I think it belongs most likely as a 10-minute show,
Mm.
which there is a precedent for 10-minute animation, 12-minute animation, but I can figure out a way to make it half an hour if somebody wants it to. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to take it to networks and see if someone would like to buy it. And then in the film industry, when you are not an experienced TV writer, which I'm not, they will assign you a showrunner.
Mm.
So most likely someone else would be running the actual show, but I would still be the show creator. I would still be largely responsible for a lot of the creative choices, but someone would basically be guiding the show. That's what would end up happening. And I really hope it does because I actually don't want to be the showrunner. I don't have the adequate amount of experience. So
Oh, yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
goal.
So we want to help Emily get this made. I think it's a little underestimated how much it is helpful to go over to YouTube, and it's going to be super easily clickable in the show notes, and give it a like and leave a comment. That will really help show that there is interest in this and get this made for you. I would love to even go a little bit bigger in your vision. What do you think a world would look like with less sexual shame and more exploration, in a world where people can know what they want, work through the shame, communicate what they want on a sexual level? Because we're talking about kink and BDSM. What would that world look like, do you think?
Well, for one thing, we'd see less abuse. I think shame is the cause of so much abuse because if you're doing something you're ashamed of and someone uses it to abuse you, who are you going to tell? You're not going to tell anybody because you don't want anybody to know you're into this weird, creepy thing. So you keep it to yourself and you continue to take the abuse. We'd see more people make better decisions about who their partners are because they would have more information about how to look for a good partner and what are the red flags. And I think that is a thing that I very much want to see because the amount of abuse out there in the kink world is pretty high. And it's high because of the shame. I think people would get more enjoyment out of their sex lives. I think marriages would probably be better off if you actually had open communication. And I know there are people who believe that you should just instinctively know what the other person likes, and that is absolutely ridiculous. The whole, oh, but if you ask someone if you can kiss them, it takes out the romance. No, let me tell y'all, no. The first time I ever kissed my husband, he asked if he could kiss me, and it was one of the hottest things ever. So I think it'd just be better for everyone. Obviously, I'm talking about consenting adults, consenting human adults. One time I said consenting adults on Twitter, and someone asked me if I was advocating for people to have sex with goats. So you have to be very specific.
Yay.
Yeah. That's anyway, that's what I think. Consent, as long as it's consenting human adults and you're keeping safety in mind. I'm not saying you can't do unsafe things, just keep in mind safety precautions as you're going, then you should be able to do whatever makes you happy without shame.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I am going to hope for a world like that. And it doesn't have to come through BDSM kink, although it can. And so, again, knowing yourself, I talk about that over and over in this podcast. Know yourself to know what you want. Know yourself to know what you want. And if you need to take a break from all things as much as possible to get to know who you are, I have so many episodes about getting to know who you are. So you can just look in the catalog and find those, because I give actionable tips to find out who you are and what you want. It is really the cornerstone of it. And then working through the shame and working through all the wounds that we pick up through our childhood and all other experiences. So I'm going to hold that vision with you, Emily. And I really am hoping that your series gets picked up and that everyone can benefit from your wisdom and from the way you approach it, which again is really whimsical and fun. And you'll be laughing and giggling, I think, as you watch this, instead of maybe seeing something else that you feel intimidated by.
I'm so glad you said that because honestly, by the 800th time you've watched it, nothing is funny anymore. I don't even know. Are these jokes landing? Does any of this work? I can't tell. I've seen it so many times.
I know that as a director and as a producer, I have that same experience. So I totally get it. But yes, it is. It's fun, it's approachable, and it's just so whimsical. So everyone go click on the link right now to go over to Emily's YouTube channel and like it and comment, please, to help her out.
Please go watch it and like it. If we get like a bazillion likes and comments, right now there's a lot of positive comments. I've been waiting for scary old biddies to come and be like, how dare you? But we haven't really had that. Maybe it just doesn't attract that yet. Honestly, I feel like maybe we'll have made it when it does. I've gotten weirdly no trolling, no hate. I'm the kind of person who automatically just blocks anyway without engaging, so maybe that's why. But so far it's been really positive, which is great because that means when I take it in to pitch, it'll be like, check our YouTube comments, check our likes, check all of this. Clearly is something that people want to see. So even if all you do is just like it, you can put it on and then go watch something else. Please don't. But if you do, that still helps us because the more we can show people like this, the easier it's going to be to pitch as a series.
Yeah. And I don't even think that people are going to want to put it on and go do something else because, like I said, it's really entertaining and it's 10 minutes. It's really just a fun way to spend 10 minutes. Everyone go over and check that out, like and comment.
And if you know anyone who has been curious about kink, or you just want to tell your friends who are like, what is this weird thing you do? That's what the video is designed to do. It's designed to be like, hey, do you not know anything about kink, but you want to? This is why I made it. So people could pass it around when someone's like, I don't know. Maybe I want to try some stuff. Watch this video.
I think that's really important because it's important to have those kind of resources. Because when I was exploring relationship diversity in the beginning, and specifically when I was starting to tell friends or family, and they were like, I don't understand that. That's so different. I was like, okay, check out this podcast episode and this video. And it really, really helped. And I think that, again, because the pilot of Welcome to Kinkyville is so accessible, I think that it would be great education for people who maybe even aren't interested in practicing it themselves, but they want to understand you more, and you would love for them to understand you more. So it's a great resource. Go check it out. Again, it's going to be right in the show notes. Emily, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Relationship Diversity Podcast. Want to learn more about relationship diversity? I've got a free guide I'd love to send you. Go to www.relationshipdiversitypodcast.com to get yours sent right to you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast. You being here and participating in the conversation about relationship diversity is what helps us create a space of inclusivity and acceptance together. The more comfortable and normal it is to acknowledge the vast and varied relating we all do, the faster we'll shift to a paradigm of conscious, intentional, and diverse relationships. New episodes are released every Thursday. Stay connected with me through my website, carriejaroslow.com, Instagram, or TikTok. Stay curious. Every relationship is as unique as you are. Are you wondering why you never seem to find lasting fulfillment in your relationships? Or do you create the same kinds of relationship experiences over and over again? Can you never seem to find even one person who you want to explore a relationship with? Have you just given up hope altogether? If this sounds like you, my recent book, Why Do They Always Break Up With Me, is the perfect place to start. The foundation of any relationship, whether intimate or not, is the relationship we have with ourselves. In the book, I lead you through 8 clear steps to start or continue your self-exploration journey. You'll learn about the importance of self-acceptance, gratitude, belief shifting, and forgiveness, and given exercises to experience these life-changing concepts. This is the process I use to shift my relationships from continual heartbreak to what they are now, fulfilling, soul-nourishing, compassionate, and loving. It is possible for you. This book can set you on a path to get there. Currently available through Amazon or through the link in the show notes.